Hey, the agenda is always interesting. This year, rules changes on the agenda. Talk to me about something that you're keeping an eye on.
Well, I certainly think that the proposed onside kick alternative is something that is fascinating. In speaking to people, GMs, otherwise, so far at the meetings, everybody wants a little bit more information on this. Any votes are going to come down tomorrow, it sounds like, on the substantive rule changes. But think about a system where you potentially, rather than trying for an onside kick, you're trying for a 4th and 15, backed up deep in your own territory to extend the game. It sets up a fascinating sequence of situations and scenarios in which would teams actually attempt this. If you're down, 3 scores, you score, you try it again. What if you take the lead against the Packers? You don't want to see Aaron Rodgers on the field again, and so you go for a 4th and 15 to try to keep him out of the game. You always have done this, of course, with the onside kick, and in fact, you're closer to your own goal line with this proposed alternative. But it's a very interesting debate. Certainly, you're going to have old school people who are going to be flatly opposed to the entire idea of it. But there's player safety stuff here. They've adjusted the kickoff rules, eliminating the run up to the kickoff. That, of course, makes it harder to get onside kicks, which we saw in the numbers last year. So that's a big one. And then, of course, the various permutations of the potential changes to instant replay, none of which would have fixed what happened in the NFC title game a year ago to the Saints, but potentially expanding some of the reviewable plays and where you'd be able to challenge.
Well, that to me is the main problem is if you are going to alter instant replay, and there are a couple of proposals that have been submitted, a couple by Washington that would make everything reviewable. I don't think in terms of pace of play and time of the game that's going to pass. They want to add the review of all personal fouls as well. That's a possibility. But to me, something, Tom, that has been interesting in the AAF, and those games have aired on NFL Network, and I've been calling those for the last few weeks, is that there's a sky judge who has the ability in the last 4 minutes of a game to not only change a call, but to make a call, which would have alleviated the problem that we saw in the NFC Championship game and would have been able to correct the call. Now, in the whole 7-week season so far, the sky judge has changed exactly one call. But if that call is of the magnitude that we saw in the championship game this past year, why not have a sky judge? Yet it seems like that is not something that they're going to be considering.
Well, I think, first of all, Dan, there's always been resistance among the ownership and the competition committee to substituting one person's judgment for another. In other words, having not just objective things, not was the ball out of bounds, was his knee down, but was that pass interference? Because when you read the rules on pass interference, you have to have a material restriction of the receiver. There's some very technical terms that come down to an element of subjectivity. So we can look at the play in the NFC Championship game and say that was the most obvious play ever. And certainly it appeared to be, when you watched it, particularly from the end zone angle, it looked like an obvious call. But what about the call that's 10% less obvious than that? What about the call that's 10% less obvious than that? Every fan, every coach, every player is going to think the calls that go against them are all obvious, that they blew all of them, that the sky judge should be intervening. But kind of where do you draw the line? That's part of the the gray area that I think makes people a little bit squeamish about making that huge of an alteration. The same reason they haven't turned over those calls in the past to New York. I mean, whether it's the sky judge on site or whether it's somebody in New York, you have a big brother element to that. Frankly, at the time where you're seeing the NFL partnering with a casino, there's legalized gambling in a variety of places across the country. Some of the norms are changing in terms of that. If you implement a system where somebody who's out of sight can all of a sudden change a critical call in the game or throw a flag that wasn't thrown, they talk so much, Roger Goodell and others, about the integrity of the game, people believing that what they see on the field is real. Well, one way to call that into question would be having somebody who you don't even know exactly who they are or what their criteria is making a call from not on the field.
Well, there's one word that comes to mind. It's egregious. If it's an egregious missed call or it's an egregious mistake on a call, then you have this person in the final minutes of a game who could overturn it. But I do understand what you're saying, and I think that's the major concern with everybody in the league. It's the gray area. You're right. What if it's egregious in one person's eyes, but it's not as egregious in another person's eyes?
That very term is subjective.
Right, exactly.
What is egregious? There was They were all the place last season. I mean, you remember when Bobby Wagner jumped over the Viking center on Monday Night Football? That was leaping. That was leverage. It should have been called, and it wasn't. If you overturn that call, you throw a flag there. Maybe the Vikings get a new possession, score a touchdown, cut into the Seahawks lead. It's a completely different game. And I remember asking people, because I was right around the December meetings, asking competition committee members about that, and they said there's no appetite for having somebody weighing in and throwing a flag that wasn't thrown on the field.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.